MyPHL17 presents In Focus, a look at the issues affecting the Delaware Valley. Now here's your host, Steve Highsmith.
Few people are comfortable talking about serious illness in children, but this year there is some important talk going on about people, including children, who are at the end stage of their lives and how we could be doing better for them. Good morning. I'm Steve Highsmith, and welcome to In Focus. The Pennsylvania Department of Public Welfare commissioned a task force to look at this issue. The Palliative and Pediatric Hospice Care Task Force has now produced a number of findings. Among them, current health care and human services for children at the end stage of life are inadequate. Caring for a sick child takes a devastating toll, and there is a lack of support and information for parents struggling with difficult and emotionally charged decisions. Some of the goals of home-based pediatric end-of-life care are addressing the family's needs and desires and helping the child live each day as fully as possible, reducing anxiety and pain and stress, and increasing enjoyment and communication. The first hospice in southeastern Pennsylvania to offer home-based pediatric care was Keystone Hospice in 1995. With me now is Gail Enderweiss, President and Executive Director of Keystone Hospice and founder of Telecare Services. Gail is a registered nurse as well and an advocate for end-of-life patient care. Also here, Laura Tomei, Keystone Hospice Creative Arts and Complementary Therapies Program Director. Later we'll be joined by parents of a child benefiting from their care. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you really believe that our nation needs to sort of take a sweeping approach. A social change has to transform, has to happen in this area.
Well, our nation needs to make a sweeping change in healthcare reform in general, but hospice, particularly for children, has been the orphan in many ways over the years. And more we're seeing that if we have 56,000 plus kids dying in America, 0.4% only ever receive hospice services. A large portion of that is from misconceptions, people not understanding what hospice is, and believing that hospice means just leaving somebody with a morphine patch and letting them die, as compared to quality of living, and that's sort of what we're trying to advocate for. But more so, raising awareness of the need for children, because when we deal with children, the emotions and the intensity of that are that much more, and we're doing it disservice by not talking about the elephant in the room or the flying monkeys, so to speak.
I want to be clear about those numbers again. You say 0.4% of those 56,000
children in America ever even reaching hospice services.
And where do they get care, if any? Well,
what we see is a trend in America of looking at very aggressive treatment, and doctors will always continue to aggressively treat. But at some point, children and their families need that opportunity to just live and have quality of living. Hospice provides that, and we need to be looking at how do we create that opportunity for families to be able to have that choice. And it doesn't mean they can't change their mind. It also does not mean that we can't work within the parameters or outside of the parameters of hospice so the families can slowly go with the transition where their family is at.
When we're talking about hospice, are we talking about an on-site hospice, or are we talking about in-home, in that parent's home, the child's home?
To me, hospice is in the home. You know, obviously we would like to see some facilities throughout the United States when the child can't be managed at home, or a child that clearly doesn't have a family. We've had a few children that have died at Keystone House because there was no family, or the family structure was such that they had to be, restructured to some degree. But most children belong in their home, and they also belong having the ability to play. I think there's nothing worse than having your child rushed off to the hospital to die and set up on tubes. There's no opportunity to really be part of a family, and the siblings are the ones that get hit very bad in all of this.
Yeah, Laura, this is extremely unsettling. I mean, the death, the end-stage portion of a child's life is unsettling for anybody. When you go into homes, what's the first thing you do to try to recognize that and, as best as possible, put them at ease or start folks on the right track towards dealing with it?
Well, our focus is really on holistic care, and it's a systems approach as opposed to a disease or pathology approach, which is most medical care. Hospice is a systems approach. It looks at the whole family system. The patient becomes the family, and those needs are assessed not only regarding comfort and basic comfort and the medical needs of the child who is sick, but it's also the comfort and quality of living needs of the family. So a lot of times my job as a music therapist and a director of the program at Keystone is restoring a quality of living to everyone and bringing the childhood back to that family, because that's what's lost in a disease process mostly is that childhood, and the opportunity to make those memories and have just a play and family time that is not focused on a medical management or rushing back and forth to a hospital or visiting in a hospital setting that is not the home.
This is not easily attainable, though, in many cases. It's a process that you have to go through, and there's going to be 2 steps forward and 1 step back sometimes in this, because you have to balance the care. The doctor is going to say, I want you to have this certain type of treatment or medication, and you have to balance all of that.
But I believe that parents and families need to ask other questions also. If we're balancing the care, what does this mean? Does it mean I'm going to have 3 more months of really a good family quality life, or am I going to have 4 more months where the child's sick all the time and getting invasive treatments and therapies?
Is there a threshold for where you can say you've attained that holistic approach or that personalized care? You know, in terms of, you know, what the regimen is for the child or the environment that the child and parents are in the house?
I believe that that's very individualized, and I believe that at some point, though, we also have to pull back and, as providers, really look at what we're doing. And I'm talking about the whole healthcare system, because oftentimes you'll see that the child who's dying and the sibling won't know well before the parents and the healthcare folks talk about it. And frequently we see where the child will protect the parents and the doctor, which is really kind of sad.
Explain that a little bit. What do you mean?
Well, oftentimes they don't want to go back. We've had a series of children recently where they really did not want to go back to the hospital, but they did not want to discuss it with their doctor because they felt like they were going to fail their doctor by talking about it. They did not want to talk about it with their parents because they're trying to protect their parents' emotion, because they see the great grief that the parents in, and so it's hard as a parent to. It's the word volema. Came up in an article I read recently. It's something that occurs that is so traumatic that it should not happen before their time. And so we're having the children really become more of the parents in those circumstances, and that's part of where we have an obligation to learn more.
Is there a missing link in terms of counseling at a certain stage in this?
I think counseling for not just the family, but counseling for the caregivers. I believe that part of the problem is as we see doctors and nurses begin to make careers in palliative care, they become more and more reticent that the two are the same. And at this point, most people in the profession don't even know the difference between the two, couldn't really clearly define what the difference is. And they really are very distinct types of treatment. The one, you're aggressively treating the symptoms of the disease. The other one, you're aggressively treating the disease and palliating the symptoms. We need to be more honest with ourselves and really demand more education within the healthcare system, because we're not servicing anyone except our own selves.
The parents, is it wrong to say that they're in denial at a certain stage, or do they recognize the problem, but at some point they shut off and don't want to face it? And we have to help them through that? Because they're facing
yes, you're absolutely right on target. And denial is not a bad thing. It helps us survive. They're facing the voloma, the unmanageable. I mean, how can you even think of wanting to give up something for your child? And so when you're encouraged to take these treatments that may even have like absolutely no outcomes, or in some cases, you know, when the first day of the task force, we saw 150 plus parents in that room. Most of them never even were given the option of hospice services. Some were threatened with DHS for opting not to aggressively treat their child. I mean, can you imagine being a parent having to stand up against that pressure?
No, okay.
And the family who will be meeting today was clearly, you know, given a very different...